Awesome. Thank you. Welcome everybody to Friday. Today we have the beautiful and lovely Loel from Washington. This is her second time hosting, right? I remember the last one was really fun, so no pressure, but that was amazing and we're really excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Um, I mentioned before we went live, she is from Washington State in the USA, and I think we're going to do a slideshow presentation. So if you just want to tell us about the artworks as they show up on the screen. Also, I wanted to ask you, are you comfortable with questions while you're painting?
Absolutely. I love questions. I'm a terrible multitasker, but please ask and I'll answer as best I
Okay,
can.
awesome. Thank you. All right, so if we're ready, we can go ahead and roll the slideshow.
Just quickly inviting our friends to follow Lo on Instagram. Her handle there is more_art hero. And of course, she's also on Facebook. And Lo has selected some of these artworks here fit for today's sharing. So, Lo, we start with this piece.
Yeah, so this is actually a sketch that we're going to do sort of a souped up version of today. I love to paint flowers with personality. And this one is about something about to burst, whether it's, a cloud that needs to rain or a heart that can't hold anymore. And so we're going to do something similar to this walnut ink piece today. So these Ikebana based pieces, I'm really loving these. There's walnut ink in the vessels and in the leaves. This is sort of the direction I'm really looking forward to going in the next few months is these Ikebana based florals. I'm really excited about these. And this one actually has a little touch of lamp black and the walnut ink. And yeah, thank you. So this is on mineral paper. So it's interesting with this walnut ink and ultramarine blue gouache is what this is. And on the rough press, it gives one look. And on the mineral paper, this blue rises to the surface. And so it really goes to show you, every pigment has a personality. And depending on how you work with that pigment, you can bring out different sides of the personality. And in this case, that vibrant blue coming up on the mineral paper is just really beautiful. This is a pretty fun one. This is Things Are Settling. It was kind of fall inspired as the seasons start to change. I was trying to capture that feeling of, say, the ocean waves that comes along and picks up the sand and the sand has to settle, or life deals you something unexpected and you have to find a way to calm inside again. So I actually took the walnut ink in this case. I had a bottle that had dried up. Actually, it just got really empty and it gets kind of warm in the studio with all the windows. And I took the dried ink and actually ground it into a powder and threw some of the fine particles into the wet paint and got this really gorgeous texture down in the lower left corner.
That's the last artwork here, though.
Okay.
So
Just really quick, I want to invite anybody who wants to at home to try to paint along. If you don't have walnut ink, that's okay. You're welcome to shop for it while we're talking. I'm just kidding, but you should check it out.
Amazon.
But at the end, maybe we could have a moment for those of you who painted along to show your work.
Yeah, I would love that. So you guys ready to get started?
Yeah,
Let
let's
me
do it.
switch cameras real quick. All right, so it's morning here in the studio. I hope the light is okay for everyone to see. And before we start this piece, the mineral paper did get mentioned, and I wanted to show you. Let me grab off to the side here, just the difference. So I had some examples. This is the same. This is the same mix. This is walnut ink mixed with the ultramarine blue gouache, and just the way that it's manipulated differently on the different kinds of papers, I can get these nice ripples and waves, or this beautiful sort of milky gray on rough press versus mineral paper. So today again, I always really just encourage play, play, play. And this is just another example of that same mix, same pigments, but different surface.
I posted the link to the mineral paper on Amazon for those of you who are in the US, but I think it is available. That's probably available worldwide, isn't it?
I think so.
I think it's Yatsumoto brand,
Yeah,
multimedia
yeah.
mineral paper.
So it's this one.
That's right.
So again, and the emphasis is just play. You know, all these different, every pigment has a different personality, and those personalities come out with your brushes and paint. It's amazing. So for today, walnut ink. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff made from the walnuts. I originally picked it up because it reminded me of my grandmother. So it was sort of a sentimental thing, but it's just this gorgeous, gorgeous brown. So here are just some sketches. I just drew with pencil a little ginkgo leaf and filled it in with the ink and then etched some lines. This one I drew with the ink, a little outline, and then filled in with color. So you can do a lot of beautiful, fun stuff with it. This is that first piece that we showed, this sort of heart that can't hold anymore floral that we're going to do today. And I hope you guys do paint along. This is the palette that I'll be using. I call it my Earth and Sky palette. When I find a color mix that I really love, I'll capture it on a 4x6 card and keep it for reference.
Excuse me, Loel. Is
Yep.
the overhead light on with your overhead camera?
Well,
Because
I appreciate something. I was about to see if that helped. The sun is shining through the windows, and there's not much else I can. Did that help? Better?
uh, not much. You have a lot of shadows that are showing from behind you, I think,
Well, that is
across the.
that is. There's not another shade that I can close, so I apologize for that. I'll brighten this up as much as I can. So from what
They're
I'm seeing,
beautiful pictures.
thank you. All right,
It
I
looks
think
pretty good. It's not too bad.
okay, it's not too bad. So this is the palette. While the first layer of that floral dries, I'm going to show you also how to make this broken vessel texture. I got a lot of questions on Instagram about this broken vessel texture, so we're going to make one of those today as well. So I'll be using a rough press paper, a few rounds. These are just the silver black velvet brushes, and then a sort of stiffish dagger. This is an Escoda synthetic, just a nice stiff dagger brush. So I don't usually sketch with these Ikebana pieces. I'll show you that same one in person. I have been sketching more with these. With my abstracted florals, I'll usually just more ground myself with a focal point. I usually like to use a lightly colored watercolor pencil for that because it will disappear. And we're just going to have it come out like yay and kind of paint along two planes to get our focal point. So I have my mixes already stirred up in my little pots. I've got my burnt bronzite genuine. This one is the bloodstone genuine mixed with the walnut ink. I've got some manganese blue hue, and then I have my Cascade green. And just to show you, I'll just refresh this one so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm really just taking just straight from the tubes and just mixing them together in my little dishes. Yay. And then with the walnut ink as well. And by stirring these together, I'm really getting the best of both worlds with these textures. They're really just lovely. So that's what we're going to play with today. So for our first petal, the idea with this sort of stiff brush is I want to create a lot of rough edges. So I'm just going to make a rough petal shape. And when I add my gouache and walnut ink mix, you can immediately see as it takes off into the water that just really lovely blues and greens.
Lowell, when you mix those together, so when you mix the watercolor with the walnut ink, is there a proportion that you're trying to achieve between ink and watercolor?
No, I'm just going for the color and granulation. So for example, this Bloodstone Genuine mixed with walnut ink is just this beautiful, deep, deep brown. And I wanted the olive with my Cascade green.
Wonderful. So your goal
And
is just color and granulation.
yep. And I'm using the manganese blue hue. It's actually already has the pigment in it. So the PB15 that is in the Cascade Green wash is actually what is this manganese blue hue. So I get a lot of complementary colors that makes for a really cohesive palette. So I'm going to come to the edges over here and add my Bloodstone Genuine with my walnut ink and let it sit for just a minute and then send it back over. So you can see I'm getting a lot of lovely granulation from it and it's coming back into the gouache and making sort of a nice bloom. And then I'll just make another one coming down here. Let that spill.
Camera out of focus.
Yeah, I see that. Should... Oh gosh, you guys, I didn't have this problem before. Believe it or not,
How about if you put your hand down on your paper so that,
yeah, it's curious,
It's
isn't
going
it?
to.
that's
Believe
bad.
it or not, I did test
There it
runs.
goes. There it
There you
goes.
go.
Ah, I did
It's
test
one of
runs.
the laws of nature.
There you got it.
I actually recorded test runs. Anyway, so I'm dropping in the Bloodstone Genuine at the end of these beautiful little petals here. And I like to add a little bit of sparkle. So this is that burnt bronzite genuine. And then I'll come in with some manganese blue hue.
Probably already mentioned this. Is this gouache and watercolor today or just watercolor?
It's gouache and watercolor.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
And so I'm just going to tilt and let that run a little bit. I have an opportunity here in these gaps to fill in with just that little bit of sparkle to highlight that rough edge. I like the petals to look a little bit broken. And that's why I'm using this rough press paper. It's going to give these granulating pigments little nooks and crannies, little homes to settle into, and give the water in my brush strokes some texture that I can take advantage of with my brush like that. So while this is still a little bit wet and can blend, I'm going to come in with some blue up top. And tie these together. So I really am just letting all of these pigments just mingle as much as possible. I'll come over here. Another bit of dark. And while
Where did
that
you
settles.
find your little bowls?
Oh, so these were made for me. I have a potter friend who made these for me. They're actually in the chemistry lab. These are evaporating dishes, like the water evaporates. It's just evaporating dishes, and you can buy them. You can buy them on Amazon. They have different sizes. So it's like your little porcelain ink pots, but with a little beaker lip. So I actually have a lot of labware in my studio. I used to be a researcher, and labware makes the best studio wear, I find. So yeah.
Love it. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. They actually have my name on the bottom, which when you have a name like mine is that's kind of a treat. You don't find many things with your name on them. So while this settles just a little bit, you asked about the gouache versus the watercolor. I have tried these mixes with both. I think it must be a pigment loading thing with the gouache. I just am able to achieve these textures much, much, much more readily than with the watercolor. It still is beautiful. The watercolor makes beautiful mixes, but when I have the gouache on hand as an option, I will choose it because I'll get these lovely textures that I'm after. So we're going to add one more petal here to the sky. And again, I'm finding all those little magic places in this rough press paper that I can bring out this sort of pattern in the water. And so I am just going to let this sit for a bit and dry and do its mingly thing. While this layer does dry, I will switch gears and again show you this broken vessel texture that I got so many questions about. You guys are quiet. Do you have any questions so far?
No, we're all in awe. Just beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
It's like
I
a
think you have a
meditation.
lot of us painting along with you.
Ah, good. I was so
Beautiful.
hopeful. The palette and invited people. I love the paint along trend that's been happening. So yeah, we're just gonna let these sit and do their magic. There's, I'll bring it closer. Again, the Bloodstone Genuine doing its thing, the Cascade Green. I love those little washes that I'm getting right there, and the sparkle of the Burnt Bronzite Genuine. I'll lower it slowly so we keep focused. So while this
Does
does its magic,
does the walnut oil go clear when you mix it?
does the ink go clear? Is that the question?
Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
No, it stays nice and brown. And so it's giving me, it's sort of richening the watercolor and gouache that I'm using. But it does get this beautiful, transparent, light brown, beautiful quality that I love. So it happened again. So while this dries, we're going to do that broken vessel texture. I'm actually going to switch blocks and use a Bao block for that. So let's set this aside to do its magic. This paper is sort of new to me. This is the first block of it that I've tried. But I love the texture of it. It really does bring the drama. So I'm just going to start by making sort of a rough shape for a vessel, probably a rectangle. I'll fill in with the Bloodstone Genuine and walnut ink mix that I have. And then I'm going to drop in buff titanium. So it is no secret that I am a fan of the watercolor sticks. I love them. You can tell the ones that get a lot of love in the studio, right? They're like these. The buff titanium is one of those. This one I've used quite a lot. It has a little well in the center, and I'll show you in a little bit why that is pretty useful. So again, I'm using that dagger. I'm going to get some nice rough edges in my water. I'm going to turn my paper and tilt it and let this mix run down the page. And you can see it's getting all that nice granulation and spidering from the Bloodstone Genuine, from the walnut ink. I'm going to tilt it back and let the water kind of retrieve some of that, and then tilt it again. I move my paper a lot when I paint.
Lowell, you're getting a lot of wonderful comments. So Kathleen Munns said it is stunning. And Valerie says so beautiful. Lots and lots of comments. So yeah, we are quiet today, but everyone's mesmerized.
Thank you. So now with this watercolor stick, I'm going to take a little bit of water with again, we have evaporating dishes, pipettes. I've got test tube holders to keep my paints in. I'm going to fill in this little well, and I really want to load this brush really, really thickly with pigment. I want a nice creamy mix. So the sticks are just fantastic. You can activate them in a little bit of water and get a beautiful dilute color, or you can draw with a wet brush straight off of them and get rich pigment. And I'm looking for kind of the Goldilocks sheen on my paper where it's not too puddly wet, but it's not too dry either. And I am going to bring this, we have to be patient for a little bit longer. It's doing its magic and waiting for the right moment. I'll bring it close to the camera. I would usually leave it flat. This is one where I don't want to tilt my paper, but you'll see as I start to drop in that buff titanium, all of that beautiful spidering, little fractally bits that are happening, that is giving it that, what I've been calling the broken vessel texture. And so I would just let that sit and mingle and do its magic. And so again, nice creamy buff titanium into that kind of dilute bloodstone genuine and walnut ink mix. And then because I have some out, it's fun just to throw some sparkle in too. This is my burnt bronzite genuine. And a little gold. I do like to add little bits of gold. And just to go back to one of those Ikebana pieces I showed, the gold into the walnut ink is just, I come back to that combination again and again and again. So I like to always drop a little bit in. So I'll bring it closer again so you guys can see. So yeah, those beautiful pigments all working together. And we can add just a little bit more as it's starting to kind of dry. So yeah, get the idea there. So I will set this one aside and we can come back to our first piece. So this guy is still kind of doing its thing. I tend to not dry these very much. I will just let all the colors kind of mingle together and do their magic. And I'm really after these wonderful textures that are happening and the contrast of the transparent and the opaque. I really just love that. So I am seeing some of the comments. I see a landscape of Washington comment. I look forward to seeing what comes of that. That'll be amazing. So I am, in the interest of time, just going to give this one a little bit of dry so we can put the second layer on. I see some other questions too coming through the chat. So one is about ink with a lunar black. And actually there's some of that in this piece. You can see some where I added the walnut ink and the lunar black here, those darks coming together. There's actually another similar little floral where I have the lunar black here and the walnut ink coming out of the center. So it's really a beautiful combination. It took me a while to kind of play with adding such darks to these florals, but it really adds some dimension. I'm kind of a fan and going to play with that some more.
There's a question. I don't know if you want to address this, but there have been a few questions about the difference between Yupo paper and the mineral paper, and then maybe talk about that versus like the Bao watercolor paper.
Sure. So my understanding is I don't use Yupo much, so bear with if I'm not pretty accurate. But my understanding is that the UPO is it's plastic. I think it's a different kind of plastic than what is used in the mineral paper. The mineral paper is ground limestone embedded in what's called HDPE, like a certain kind of plastic. So it's an 80%, I think, limestone to 20% plastic to hold it together. So it is very silky. It is very smooth. It comes recommended for watercolor and gouache, and it's fun to play with. You can get some beautiful effects with it. In terms of the bao hong, grab my block off the floor. Anytime anyone raves about a product, I can't help but try it, and I see more and more people using the bao hong Master's Choice paper. So I ordered a block. This is my first one. I can't, I'll give the caveat of it's my first block. I've worked through about half of it, but my initial impressions are I'm really enjoying it. It definitely brings some drama. The cold press is actually a little bit of a rough texture, and I'm getting some beautiful drama with some of my pieces with it. So I definitely am going to keep using it. I'm excited to order the rough press. I think that's going to be a treat. In my experience, the pigments, it takes more water to move the pigments on this paper than it does the arches that my hands are really, really used to. And the pigments, though, do tend to kind of sit on top. They're more vibrant, right? And again, it comes back to this pigment personality and different tools bringing out different sides of those personalities. And you really just find that through play. I can put the same mix on this paper versus the arches, and I just tend to get more drama here. The mineral paper, I get that blue rising to the top as opposed to settling into the grooves. So play.
Thank you. That's great. There was a lot of questions about that. I wanted to read a couple of comments about, and then now I can't find them. Everyone is loving how those colors are mixing together for that flower this flower in front of us now. And I just wanted to clarify that those first two colors, she's not mixing walnut ink with all the colors, just the first two, correct?
Correct.
So the bloodstone and the cascade, but the other ones she's just charging in by themselves.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
I will dry this just a little bit so we can put the second layer on. So bear with.
Hi all, while she dries, I just want to add that this is super fun to mix all these colors she's doing. I'm having a lot of fun here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna.
All right, so for the second layer, I'm going to come back to this dagger brush that I have been using. And I'm actually going to stand. The idea is to get my paper away from my body. So maybe if you're sitting, you can put your paper on the floor or a stool in front of you. However, you can comfortably make the paper be a little bit further away from your body, because I want to paint from my elbow or my shoulder more so than from my wrist, so I can get some nice loose strokes onto the page. If you're too close to everything, it just keeps the painting really kind of tight. So I'm just loading this dagger brush. I'm going to start in my center. And the idea is to not try to make it too perfect.
Lowell, I used the word charging in a color, and there's a question about, do you want to talk about that real quick?
That's the first time I'd heard that.
So charging in a color is just when you drop it in. Like when you've got
Yeah.
a and you just drop it in, we say charging. It's just a silly term that artists use. One of those things. How would you describe it? Dropping in a color.
I've just been calling it dropping in.
Perfect. Hey, that works.
And Lo, that's the mix right now, right?
Yes, ma'am. This is the Bloodstone Genuine mixed with the walnut ink. And I just want this little abstract sort of empty petal on top. And so because I've used this rough press paper, even when I go back over the top of some of these granulating pigments, they don't lift too much. They tend to stay where I put them, which is one of the advantages there. And while this dries, I'll come back in and just kind of emphasize some of the edges. This is my burnt bronzite genuine to add some sparkle.
Ooh, here's a good question. What makes walnut ink special versus watercolor inks or acrylic inks? So specifically the Daniel Smith walnut ink. What makes that special for you?
I think it's the only ink they have, and I think it
Well, I
goes all
just
the way
mean,
back to
yeah,
Smith,
yeah,
isn't it?
just yeah. Why do you prefer the Daniel Smith walnut ink versus like using any other ink of other, other brands?
Uh, I'm not honestly, I can't really do the comparison. Here, hold on, let me put these in. Um, I think it was one of those, I picked it up and loved it, so I didn't buy anything else, to be honest.
That says it all right there.
Fair, yeah, it's a fair answer. Yeah, I picked it up from sentiment. Again, it reminded me of my grandmother, actually. She had a huge farm I spent a lot of time on as a kid and picking walnuts and from the tree and getting all the little nuts out was a thing. So it reminded me of her. And then I picked it up and it was just such a beautiful, beautiful brown. And it did the trick so nicely. I didn't do a bunch of product comparison. You could say, well, why the ink versus maybe a transparent brown? I didn't really have any transparent brown watercolors in my arsenal when I went to the CIE lab tool. I tried to look and say, okay, well, what if instead of walnut ink, I use just a transparent brown watercolor? The options that came up were quinacridone deep gold, which I think would have too much punch and not quite the right color. Burnt sienna light, I can't speak to because I haven't played with it yet very much. Quinburnt scarlet, I don't think would work very well. Permanent brown navy. The only browns I had were granulating, and so it's not really a fair comparison if I look at the watercolor brown that I had on hand mixed with the Cascade Green Gouache. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful. You still get that nice olive color and a ton of granulation, but I'm basically adding, it's iron oxide, adding dirt to a, set of pigments that already had its dirt basically in it, right? Meaning it's iron oxide. It's from the earth, right? These are earth-based things. And so yeah, maybe a transparent brown would work. Maybe I could mix a transparent brown, but then it comes down to why when I have the perfect, not to sound too commercially, but why when I have the perfect thing in my hand right here, would I branch out too hard?
Well, Letty was saying in the chat that our Daniel Smith walnut ink is natural, so it's actually made from the pulp of the walnut, which is just so cool. And
right?
Connie in Facebook said it has a much more organic feel than like an acrylic ink. So again,
How
helping
light fast is
with
it?
minerals. How light fast is it?
Yes.
That's a good question, Letty.
My understanding is that it's very light fast. It's advertised at light fast. I've had some hang loose in the studio unprotected, and it's been gorgeous for years.
So cool. You know, I we love painting with like the Primatech line because it's actual like it's organic, um, actual something from the earth. And so with the walnut ink, you're also getting that same feel like you're painting with something that's actually from the earth. So it's just really cool. Here's what Letty says. So walnut ink is a finely pigmented water-based ink made from walnut husks for drawing, painting, and lettering. The sepia tone is fade resistant and handles like a transparent watercolor with good layering and lifting capabilities in darker washes. So it is light fast, non-acidic, and low staining. So it's low staining. That surprised me. Walnut ink also adds warmth and historical character when painting over sketches done in permanent black ink. Very cool. Thank you, Letty. And
Dan,
we have about 20 minutes left, about 18 minutes left. So you're doing great.
perfect. So I'm just letting, the colors I dropped into the second layer just kind of mingle and do their thing. Again, with this, I try to just let it play, just let it sit and do its best. And even just the addition of this weird sort of calligraphy loose petal, just adds, I think, some depth already to the floral that we had. So we'll let this sit a little bit. I'll dry it and I'll add some touches of gold. And then I know some people said they were painting along, and I am looking very forward to that. So I quite love iridescent gold. Everything gets just a little bit of sparkle on my paintings. I have this little pot of gold. I have a carousel filled with pans that you can remove, and this is my old gold brush. We've talked about this before. I will paint with everything. I have everything from staples to feathers to sticks, and they're all valuable in their own way. This brush gives the just right little gold dots to my pieces. So even though it's a little bit sad, it's just the perfect tool, and I haven't found another one that does as good a job. And just that little bit of sparkle. And I'll dry it before it picks up the walnut ink because it will lift out if I'm not careful. A little touch there. bring it closer so you can see the Bloodstone Genuine, the walnut ink, the rough edges, that again, that sort of trying to convey that idea of something that's just about to burst, like a heart that just can't hold anymore. And all those little beautiful textures that happen and the colors and blending. So I'll give it a little sign and then hope that I left a little time because I knew some people were gonna paint along. So I hope that there's some questions and some art to look at here at the end.
Franna, I hope I'm saying that right, in the comments said she uses walnut ink with a twig in life drawing.
Fantastic.
Super
I
cool.
love that. Great. So did anybody paint along with either of the textures or with the floral or have any questions? We can always play and do some other mixes.
Oh, I see Anna.
Yes.
Beautiful. Sylvia. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Kathleen.
Oh my gosh. Yes, Sylvia.
And Letty. Wow. Wow. Anna Marie. I here today, but if Buffy were here, she would say new colors unlocked. Karen. Oh, let's see. Love it. Oh my goodness, you guys. Okay. Thank you for painting along. Love it. Somebody needs to get a
Thank you,
screenshot.
Loel.
Thank you. Well, so we have a little bit of time. If there's no other questions, we can talk about maybe the process for some of these other textures where I've been using the walnut ink in these pieces. Is that a good option maybe?
Yeah, there's a quick question. I think that's a great option. There are a couple questions suddenly in the chat. So there's like three. What are the paint holders? We already talked about that. And then why Cascade Green gouache instead of watercolor?
So I think it's the pigment loading. I've tried it with both, and I just am able to more readily get these textures that I'm after with the gouache as opposed to the watercolor. And I had the examples of the Cascade Green and then the ultramarine blue, you know, kind of being true in both cases. The watercolor is beautiful. If you have that on hand and mix it, it's wonderful. But the gouache does tend to give these textures a little bit more readily.
When you're done, do you save your walnut ink and pour it back in the jar or leave it in the dish, especially with your mixtures?
No, I think that's, you know, the scientist comes through again. It's like once it's out of the container, I tend not to put it back in. So I have lots of little dishes and beakers. So for example, if I were going to sketch with it, I would use a pipette to draw from my walnut ink well and put some into a little beaker or container to then put brushes or sticks or whatever I'm using to use it. And then it would not go back into my main container.
No contaminating.
Right, right. Oh, so I see one about the other two finished pieces. Are you talking about these Ikebana florals? These, yes? I think was the question from Sue. Ah, yeah,
Sorry,
so these, sorry?
Yeah. I think that's what she's referring to.
Yeah. So these are actually pretty near and dear. You know those moments where everything just feels like it comes together. You know, that's what these Ikebana pieces are for me. I all of a sudden all of the textures and backgrounds and things that I had been playing with came together one in one piece in one way. And so this is actually the sketch for a finished piece that is at the frame shop getting a new outfit for my winter show. And this is a second example, another final piece. I don't want to get too low of it in my other paint, but yeah, these beautiful. There's just so many ways I can play with textures on the vessels and the flowers and the backgrounds themselves. I have little weird one over here with yellows. I was playing with this as well. Green apatite into Hansa yellow is one of my favorite little combinations, and that walnut ink into the apatite genuine there is really just a fun combination. And so coming back to this idea of painting with rocks and sticks and twigs, I actually, when I make these, I start with a background where I put rocks and sticks on my paper and just lay them. You can kind of see here, I've saved the white of the paper by covering it with things I found in my yard. And then I take one of these misting bottles and put water over the top, remove the rocks and sticks and leaves or whatever I've used, and then drop pigment in and actually put a saran wrap over the top of that and just walk away. And I get these beautiful textures in the background that way. Then I come back in with my watercolor mixes and walnut ink and always a little bit of sparkle. This one had the lamp black in it too, and do my overlays and try to bring out these beautiful textures in the leaves and the petals and the vases.
Lowell, can you say again how you saved the white on that one before you did the
I'll show you. It's let me grab my so I have talk about your paint tools, right? I mean, we could do a whole tour. I've got everything from staples and feathers to rocks and sticks. I mean, the studio is just filled with all kinds of things to play with. I'll grab a scrap piece of paper from over here. So all I did was to take some of these, and I would draw my composition, sketch it out on sort of another piece of paper on my sketchbook, and then just put my rocks and sticks and leaves and whatever else I found from the yard on the paper and just leave them there, and then come in with my spray bottle, mist over the top, take off the rocks and sticks and whatnot, and then put my pigment onto my paper and let it roll around and mix and put some splashes in, all of that, and then put saran wrap over the top. And that's how it's actually Buffy was the first person I saw putting rocks on paper, spraying water over the top, and then coming back in with color. And it's just a wonderful way to you have these natural organic shapes on your paper, preserving that white space.
Cool, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
There's so many great comments, and there's a couple questions. So how do you clean your brush with the walnut ink on it?
Oh, just like you would your watercolor brushes, just rinse. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Jenny, the most beautiful comment. Sorry to interrupt you. She said, very beautiful, so inspiring. I've only just started to paint. My first painting was inspired by your style and technology. So feel very privileged. Sorry, technique, not technology. So feel very privileged to watch you live. Thank you. That's so sweet.
Oh, you guys, thank you. I love that. Thank you. So
Awesome.
I see someone, they need their own jar with rocks and stuff. I agree. I'm going to go steal some ginkgo leaves from the neighbors today. I have an idea for a background where I preserve the white space with the ginkgo leaves and then do some cattails with my ikebana. So yeah, just all the materials from nature. Bring them all inside to do your paintings. I'll switch the camera back maybe.
Yeah, even Raphael in Facebook said that he's going to try this suggested palette, maybe substituting manganese blue with lunar blue that also has PB15. So yeah, you've inspired one of the great Italian masters, Raphael. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Lowell, for sharing your gift and your magic and your playtime with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for those who played along today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Happy
Thank you,
weekend,
Ashley.
everybody.
And thank you,
Happy
Loel.
This was
weekend.
great
Weekend,
fun.
everyone.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Very, very
you.
good.
Thank you.
Very good fun.
Bye.